What is Bigfoot woo? It's the whole idea of Bigfoot as a more metaphysical or spiritual being with psychic and metaphysical abilities. It's not a new idea, it goes back to Native American lore. But many have problems with it, especially if they put logic ahead of all other areas of thought. And I've struggled with it too in my early research days, listening to people talk about strange concepts that didn't make any sense to me in the context of an undiscovered ape in our forests. I really tried to approach it with logic for years, as I tried to fit these beings into a box, the box labeled flesh and blood creature. But as more time went by and more people were talking about more metaphysical experiences they'd had with them, I was starting to realize I couldn't keep them in that box anymore. But that's how we viewed all cryptids in those days, as some undiscovered animal we needed to find and photograph. But what if they're more than that? What if there are aspects of them that don't fit with our current definition of logic? Cryptozoologists use certain formulas to decide if a supposed cryptid might really exist or is worth investigating. And one of those formulas is to assess if people from different areas of the world or the country that have no relationship or interaction with each other report similar strange details about a creature. If they do, we have to ask ourselves if there's more to this subject than we first thought. And in the case of metaphysical aspects of Bigfoot, this seems to be true. And many people, erring on the logical side, just wish the woo would go away. But the woo isn't going away, and I'll tell you why. Just 10 or so years ago, talk of mind speak, a unique type of telepathy some claim to use to talk with Bigfoot, cloaking, the way that Bigfoot seemed to become invisible, and zapping, that sensation of being immobilized in some way when Bigfoot are around, were subject to a lot of ridicule in the Bigfoot community. But as more people got curious and entered the world of Bigfoot research, and as people got closer to these beings and formed relationships with them, more strange things were beginning to be reported. These concepts were beginning to be accepted as the norm in the Bigfoot world, just within 10 years. And as the nature of Bigfoot research in general changed, the conversations about Bigfoot changed. Ever since researchers started to let go of their egos and their ideas about getting the money shot of Bigfoot, and they stopped setting up game cams or chasing these beings through the woods with high-tech equipment, more conversations about experiences of a more psychic nature started to surface. When many researchers started to take the idea that Bigfoot may be a type of human, and they started to take a Jane Goodall approach and attempt to foster meaningful relationships with these beings, I believe a major breakthrough was made, and we're only just starting to see it. Whenever anyone comes into my life out of nowhere, I always ask myself, what is this person here to teach me? And under the guise of being logical, I forgot to ask myself that question when I first started Bigfoot research. I didn't ask that question at first because I was too busy looking at them from that outdated quote-unquote logical perspective that all other researchers shared at that time, that we needed to get some clear footage of this undiscovered ape and prove they were real. End of story. But as I soon realized, it was far from the end of the story. When people started contacting me, telling me of the strange communications they had with them, or the strange things they saw them do, or the strange things they experienced when the Bigfoot were around, or the strange interactions they had with them, it occurred to me that there was more to the story of Bigfoot than we ever could have imagined when we first realized they might actually exist. And it slowly and gradually became clear that, just like with us humans, there was way more to them than we ever planned to learn. I did some less than stellar research for years myself, basically going into the woods, looking to get a clear picture of something while totally rejecting the non-physical aspect of the subject. I was trying to be logical when I actually knew better. I knew from years of life experience that logic can stand in the way of finding the real truth about something. When we're trying to be logical, we're inadvertently putting up boundaries. We're saying to ourselves, I can only go so far in the way I think about this. I was doing this to myself for all those years, trying only to get that perfect picture of this undiscovered ape. It hadn't worked, and I knew it. So I had to tell myself it was time to try something else. So one day, I entered the woods with a fresh perspective, and I asked myself, what is this being here to teach me? And that's when I started having a much different experience. And I have to tell you, it was a more spiritual experience than physical. And that's what many cannot wrap their minds around. If you have a rigid idea of spirituality, or if you have no sense of spirituality at all, you may never connect with Bigfoot. They know when you're open. And you absolutely have to be open to the idea that there is more to them than just flesh and blood. And you have to be open to the concept that coming in contact with them can have some spiritual aspects. And you need to be happy and accept the idea that that is all you may ever experience with them. You may never, ever see them in the physical. But you can have a meaningful relationship with them anyway. No, the woo surrounding Bigfoot is not going away. The woo is actually the key to discovering what Bigfoot really is. And it's actually the key to understanding reality itself. Bigfoot is teaching us something very different about reality. I believe this is why sightings are up, and this is why more people are having experiences with them, because they're here to teach us something. If we as a species are going to advance our minds and reach the next level of evolution that this new age demands, we're going to have to understand that logic, as we have defined it all these centuries, is too restrictive. Logic is actually keeping us from understanding that there are many aspects to our existence and life on this planet that can't be explained in physical terms. We are not just physical beings having a physical experience. There are many facets to reality. There's a whole metaphysical plane here that hasn't been explored because we've been taught that it doesn't exist and that the physical is all there is. That is one of our biggest errors as a species. That is, until Bigfoot walked in. Bigfoot has actually forced us in a new direction. Bigfoot is teaching us that reality isn't what we thought it was, that we can't fit everything we find into a neat little box. We can't measure, weigh, and label it and put it away and believe we found the answer and move on to the next thing. The answers about Bigfoot are given to us slowly, and they're only really given to us when we can open our minds enough to really see the truth of what they are. We have to earn those answers. The Bigfoot decide what we can know about them, and they tell us things about them as we are ready to hear. But the woo isn't going away because it's what's real. The metaphysical aspects of this being are what's real. And if you can accept that, Bigfoot will show you more about themselves than you could have ever imagined. So stop looking for that undiscovered ape and start looking for a being that defies what you were always taught to believe. And then you'll find them easily.